What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Nashville Scene Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jerome Moore, and as always, I'm joined by amazing other co-hosts, editor-in-chief of the Nashville Scene, DPR. What's going on, man?
That was a flawless intro.
It was. Like, if y'all would have seen the one before.
Oh, no. First take, best take. Thank you, Jerome. Episode 4, we were scheduled last week to do episode 4, but for reasons we'll get into today, we got delayed. So we're recording this week with two of our staff reporters at the scene, education reporter Kelsey Beyeler. Hello, Kelsey.
Hello.
First appearance on the pod. And also general reporter, staff reporter Eli Motycka is here with us. Appearance number 2.
2 times Eli.
First returning guest. So what we're going to get into today is talking about the ongoing Vanderbilt University student protests, the school's reactions to those, arrests of students involved in the protests, arrest of Eli in the process of covering the protests, the fallout, how Chancellor Daniel Diermeir has dealt with it, all of that stuff. So it's a lot to get into. So thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For sure.
Cool. Why don't we kick it off by just starting with Eli? You were covering this before it sort of became such a huge story. You were on campus covering the protests. Why don't you just tell us what the protests were about and the school's reaction to it?
Sure. Kelsey and I both have covered fossil fuel divestment protests at Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
We had covered graduate student organizing, and elements of both of those stories had been about the university's kind of response and sometimes harsh response. And so we got a tip 6 weeks ago about students who wanted to vote on a boycott, divest, and sanctions resolution in their undergraduate student council. Mm-hmm. They wanted to vote on this that would, I don't actually have the exact terms in front of me, but they wanted to vote on this and it would, impose boycott, divest, sanction framework on Israeli-supported companies, I'm pretty sure. So they took it to the undergraduate student body, government president, I believe. That president took it to the administration, and then the administration said, no, you can't. You can't vote on this. It could potentially violate state or federal law. Mm-hmm. No vote. It's not moving forward. That inspired an even more concerted response by a bunch of these student groups, and that resulted in a sit-in at Kirkland Hall last week. So we had covered the challenges that these students had organizing. First they were told, you're not a registered student group, so you can't have meetings, you can't put up posters. It was a combination of 17 or 18 different groups that were pushing for this referendum. Then they were told, okay, we can't honor a reservation that one of the groups had made for a Palestine Awareness Week. So they had just reached all these roadblocks. They were told they can't vote on this. It created an even more fierce response that resulted in this big sit-in last week at the Chancellor's office and the main administrative building, Kirkland Hall.
Right. I think you described it in your first coverage of it as the students were being put through the bureaucratic spin cycle.
Yeah,
it was all of these reasons that you can't do that because of X.
An initial push that these college students had to create this coalition between I don't want to get some of the groups wrong, but like Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voices for Peace. These groups, they wanted to vote on this BDS resolution. They couldn't, and it just started to snowball. Yeah. Like first you want one thing, the administration tells them they can't, then they start to get mad, even more and more mad, more and more support. You could say mad, you could also say frustrated. Mm-hmm. Their meetings get canceled, they get called for these administrative violations that have to do with posters, and so it becomes very ticky-tacky between them and the administration, and it just builds on itself through their spring break, and then in the week after, and then ultimately in this big sit-in that was really widely seen and covered last week.
In early days, there was already a faculty response from a couple of dozen.
Yeah, that was our second piece. Was that I think 25 or 30 faculty members, some of whom wanted to remain anonymous because it's such a sensitive topic. Mm-hmm. They said, the administration, you should let this undergraduate student council vote on whatever they want to vote on, and then we can deal with the legal ramifications if there are any afterwards. Mm-hmm. The administration's position was still, no, we don't want to touch this. It's our general counsel tells us that we need to kill this resolution.
Yeah,
right.
So it's about boycotting Israel and Israeli associated companies, but it's also now just about students being mad at the administration for what they feel like is a too harsh response to what they want to do.
All right.
And so it's kind of starting to come to a head. And last week, around March 26th, there was a sit-in at Kirkland Hall, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelsey, do you ended up going down there that day. What was like the size of the turnout for how many students were there? You know,
is that for me or
yeah.
So, I mean, there were 27 students inside of Kirkland, I believe, and the building had been supposedly like closed for renovations, but some were saying that they had also thought that it was open, but there were signs on the door. So anyway, these students had to kind of like force entry into Kirkland Hall, and I believe it was 27 of them that were inside, and then you had a couple dozen or so students supporting them outside. And that was when I was there that evening, though.
Right, and the events of the day, obviously pretty heavily publicized. At the very moment, actually, we were planning on recording the podcast. Eli was arrested.
Free Eli.
Yeah. I showed up on this tip, and we were, there's an Instagram live. The students were inside. They were having this rally. Okay, big chapter in our ongoing beat. Showed up. Went up to the front door. There was a Vanderbilt cop inside. Like, I looked in, showed my press badge, talked to that police officer. The police officer was, telling me, I can't let you in right now. I have this order. Maybe that'll come back and, we'll talk again. Like, here's the situation. I go and I sort of have that conversation with several different police officers. Some mention construction that is disputed by some faculty. Some faculty say that construction ended, and the student paper said that construction ended in February, implying that was just an excuse to keep students out or to keep the building closed. So I kind of have this discussion, and I'm reporting the story, hearing different bits of information, which is our job. We try to figure out, talk to different people, get the different pieces of information to piece it together, going around to 3, 4, 5 different doors, and then at the 4th or 5th door, I'm there with our photographer, Matt Masters. He sees the police. One of them calls over to me. I'm trying to talk to the communications directors that we talk to get statements from the university. And Matt sees that behind me there's a police officer coming over, and Matt's been at enough protests to know that look, and he said, I knew immediately that they were going to put you in handcuffs, and that's what they did. And there's a video online to see what happened from there. I go downtown. As soon as the charges hit, or the charge for criminal trespassing.
So that's what's the charge,
criminal trespassing, which Vanderbilt is private property, but we're under the impression that we can take a walk through the campus. As a reporter, I'm under the impression that I can go and report on something. I've been welcomed to that campus for my whole life.
Yeah. And you've covered literal protests at the campus before, like divestment last year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us have been there in a professional or personal capacity.
So for it to be trespassing, someone has to say, you're not allowed here,
So they can pick and choose.
Well, legally, I'm not sure. Okay. Legally, you have to be informed that you're not supposed to be somewhere and be there anyway to be trespassing. So that step didn't take place.
Right.
They never told me to leave campus or anything like that. So anyway, in cuffs, go downtown. As soon as the charge hits the magistrate who kind of approves charges, they tossed it out. And then Kelsey tagged in for me to go over and keep reporting on that protest, which lasted to the next morning.
Right. That was kind of the height of the moment. And also, I want to shout out Vanderbilt Hustler, the student paper. As you mentioned that they had been reporting on this, has done a very good job of sort of beat by beat covering the on-campus protests, and a lot of student journalists there were present as well, as was Matt Masters, as was a Tennessean reporter.
Bring a buddy. Make sure that buddy can record. I mean, I can't thank Matt enough for being ready in that moment. And as reporters, like, we have our mics on, or our recorders on, just gathering information. I'm glad I had that, because in the next days, I'm like listening to those things, like, what did I say? What did I do to these officers? Did they warn? And I had that recording so I could go through and listen and just hear.
What has been in some of the response, or did you get any feedback from the outside community? Because Vanderbilt is like a silo, I feel like, in Nashville. Like, you feel welcome, but then you don't feel welcome. It's like this. This is Harvard of the South. It's this institution, right? So it's like they Vanderbilts, right? Vanderbilts, right?
There's a t-shirt.
And so where, like, And this, we're known as a city for sit-ins and civil rights movements and all of those things. And it seems like that was what was occurring, right? Just typical Nashville social movement type of things. Just this time it was happening at Vanderbilt. Were organizing organizations reaching out to you, trying to support or trying to figure out what's happening? Is that still ongoing?
Yeah,
Is
I would
community
say,
trying to support because Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt?
Several things. First, that a lot of people reach out to me, including students and faculty, talking about this new chancellor and saying that it didn't surprise them the way that he reacted to the situation, which has
I got that too.
That has been very quick to try to nip student protests in the bud and been very sensitive to criticism or the kind of maybe the kind of reporting that we're doing, where we're just kind of shining a light on what's going on there. Second, overwhelming support from people on all over the political spectrum. That reporters are there, as long as we're not hassling people, harassing people, like trying to do gotcha journalism, which maybe you'll see in some situations.
Right.
Reporters are there to get the story and get information, and everyone entrusts us with that responsibility. And so if we're carrying that out, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do our job.
Right.
So a lot of people agree with that, no matter their political affiliation.
Right.
And that's been a great support. And it's also made me say, like, I want to get back on this beat as quickly as possible because they put me in handcuffs. I have to leave campus. I can't report the story I'm there to report. Like, nothing makes you want to get back in the action and on the beat more than that, which Kelsey substituted for me that day and the following days. But I think we're kind of working out that coverage going forward.
Mm-hmm. And, it was effective. Ultimately, there was no charge brought against you because you did not trespass. But it did stop you from reporting that story. We had to go to another one of our reporters who was busy with other work and put them on the story. So it was effective. And
we weren't allowed in the building. I mean, no reporter was allowed in the building to witness the actual sit-in itself, which is something that frustrates us when we want to go see the story. We don't want to get everything secondhand when there's a story happening right in front of us.
Yeah, and right when, like, after you got arrested too, it was unclear, and there were rumors like the students might get arrested now. And now it's like, well, if he's not there to report it, is there anybody else there to report it? If they're arresting students, someone needs to be there to bear witness to that. Yeah. And so that's part of why I went over there after, later that afternoon, and then I stayed there till around 8:30 that night to just cover and see what was going to happen. And there were other students protesting out there. They were talking about what was happening on the inside. They were in very constant communication with the folks who were sitting on the inside, and they were very worried about their safety, about their health, about their well-being. And the students were very upset. And so I ended up leaving around 8:30, and then the students did end up 3 students that were inside of the building got arrested the next morning, like early in the morning. And then another student that had been on the outside, and I'm not sure exactly what time this had been arrested for vandalism because somehow one of the windows was like not broken, like shattered in. There was like the glass was cracked.
Right. I believe the 3 inside charges were, was it assault charges? Basically, 3 of the people who pushed past a Vanderbilt employee were charged. And then the person on the outside was allegedly arrested and charged with vandalism or something for breaking.
I think the larger story that we've witnessed is that tensions are extremely high. The administration stopping this avenue of expression that students felt passionately about, saying that they couldn't vote on this thing, just created a stronger pushback.
Right.
There's a pressure cooker environment on Vanderbilt's campus right now.
Absolutely.
Several of those students are still going through disciplinary process right now, and I've been told that they've, one of the charges or one of their consequences might be expulsion for them for, I don't know, one or all, I don't know. That's happening right now. Over 100 faculty members, including tenured professors, some of the most prestigious professors at Vanderbilt, signed a letter telling the administration to allow this vote, drop the charges, drop the suspensions. City council members, public, alumni. There's been a huge pushback, and that was the next thing that we wrote on Monday against the way that this has been handled by Chancellor Daniel Diermeir, who's 4 or 5 years into his stint as chancellor.
And something that came up in your reporting and we were discussing before we started rolling is he has written a book about essentially how to deal with
this is basically his area of study.
Right.
Hire me if you're a Fortune 500 company, if you're Shell or Exxon and Greenpeace is doing these protest campaigns. Hire me, I'll tell you what to do. Now he's in the position where he's the one who has to steer the ship against a huge public relations crisis. And the first thing, from what I was told, the first time many faculty heard from him was a Wall Street Journal op-ed that was published yesterday, where he was basically saying free speech is alive and well. We're commensurately punishing or providing discipline for these protesters because they broke our university policies.
Which is?
He loves to use the phrase principled neutrality. I hear that all the time whenever I'm reporting on Vanderbilt stuff.
Which some might call an oxymoron. And yeah, for the listeners, we're recording on Wednesday the 3rd. That Wall Street Journal piece published, I guess, the 2nd.
Yeah, I think it was in print today, online yesterday.
Online yesterday.
And that was the first a lot of faculty were even mad about that the first statement that they heard from their leader was in the opinion page of the Wall Street Journal. Like,
right.
This is a big organization with a lot of different stakeholders, and he's been pretty silent.
And he did respond to the Metro Council. I believe 11 Metro Council members signed onto a letter, and he responded, but part of their request was for a meeting, and he essentially didn't answer that part.
Yeah,
right?
It was just a lot of the press releases we've heard,
Right.
And they noted in the letter that even if you let the students vote on this referendum, is that resolution that they're trying to vote on, you don't have to act on it. Like they just, they can put it out there and then you don't have to do anything. But you just not even letting them doing it is a problem with us. So that's just one thing
we
to
don't
keep
even
in
know
mind.
if the BDS sanction, resolution would pass. It's essentially not even just letting them hold the vote. And it's led to, as you point out, Eli, people of all political affiliations have spoken up on this. It almost doesn't really make any difference what you're feeling on the, Israel's, military invasion of Gaza is. It's not allowing students to express how they feel about that at a university that, vies to be the Harvard of the South and has a First Amendment center.
Yeah. And these students now, as they face suspension, were kicked out of their dorms. They can't go on campus for meals. Many are on meal plan.
Right.
Yeah.
They can't potentially be on campus because they could be arrested for criminal trespass.
Yeah.
They have to find housing. All of these things are, what these students are dealing with right now, and that's kind of the state of play right now. And there's a big rally later today.
On top of just being a college student and having all the work and is it the end of the semester yet? Wrapping up the semester.
And just paying all that money to go there.
I know.
This is the financial
this
bill.
Is your school.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is what they're doing to you for this protest. So a lot of people are expressing their criticism and their displeasure with the way that this is being handled.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that Vanderbilt keeps Vanderbilting.
Yeah.
That's a thing now. But it's I think, and it's unfortunate because I think what happens is they're continuing to perpetuate this narrative about them that I think many people feel, especially growing up here, that that place is for certain particular people with a certain particular mindset, and that if you're not with this program, this is not the institution for you.
Absolutely.
And it's just really unfortunate when they could have just let people have their freedom of speech, do their thing, and then we wouldn't be in this situation. They just handled every pretty much step the wrong way thus far.
There is I agree, growing up here too, there's a sense that Vanderbilt doesn't really answer to anyone other than themselves.
Right.
And they have this huge amount of property within Midtown, in one of the wealthiest areas of Nashville, and they just keep it as a kind of kingdom. And then we were told, when I asked if I could go back to campus, they said, you have to get your appearance on campus approved, and you have to get your story approved. So there's that.
How do you get
boundaries.
your parents approved? What does that even mean?
I have to email an email, say what I'm working on, when I'm going to be there, when I'm going to leave. So
that's crazy.
My presence approved. So this is like you're saying, this sense of the community's relationship to Vanderbilt is very much in flux right now.
Yeah.
As they're drawing lines around who can and can't be here, and you could potentially get put in handcuffs if you come here and we don't like it.
Yeah.
And when we saw that statement about these media guidelines, we shared it with other organizations who agreed that is not something they've seen before. I mean, sports writers go to campus to cover games. There's all, I've been there before to cover shows on campus, right?
So that confusion of okay, well, are we allowed to go there if a police officer looks at us a certain way, or are they giving us a formal warning if they tell us to stand over there? Are they? So that, I would say, that crisis of trust is something that Vanderbilt definitely is struggling with right now with the community, especially in the way that they responded to the city council members who wanted to meet. Yeah.
Well, it's still an unfolding story. Obviously, kind of every day there's sort of a new piece of this. And I would really encourage people to read both of y'all's reporting on this. Eli, of course, you covered this in advance of all this happening. Your statement on what happened that we released on Friday, I was very proud of the way you wrote that. Kelsey, you picking, up the beat once, Eli wasn't even sure if he could be back on campus, and then Matt has been there to photo it. So grateful to have a team working together.
I want to ask Eli this question, and Kelsey.
Yeah.
I wonder, is there been history of this happening before at Vanderbilt? Or I think the probably more sensitive, even controversial question is it the topic of Israel? Is why this really happened, understanding what's going on and how our country and our American government has supported Israel at this point?
I would say that activism and organizing by students that threatens the university, fossil fuel divestment, graduate student union, and now this, there has been a definite history of surveillance of students, video footage of students meeting, being aware of students individually who are involved in those things. There has been a history of that. This specific topic of this BDS referendum seems like there has been a particular amount of attention put by the administration on potentially contesting their ability to do what they want to do on campus, for sure. And of course it's a sensitive topic, and on campus it is a very live debate. Definitely.
And I need to look more into this, but as I was reading about what was going on, I was hearing people referencing former protests, like during the civil rights movements that Vanderbilt had shut down, and now they have since, not now, but they had since come out and acknowledged that wasn't the best thing. And I think did they arrest James Lawson on campus, and now they have a James Lawson Center?
I'm not sure about where
I'll need to double check that.
That would make sense. It wouldn't be surprising if that's the case. Yeah. Okay.
I think they expelled James Lawson when he was a student there, if I remember right, for his protests and his participation in the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
So it is like it has its own chancellor and it's private property and it's huge amount of property and it's very influential, so they do kind of have their own judicial system and their own police force and their own, so there is a history of them using that in ways that people have been critical of.
Well, thank you both for joining us. Obviously still an unfolding story, and we're going to stay on top of it. So
Vanderbilt, do better, because you published my book and I know y'all are better than that, so do better.
I will say so many faculty, students, staff are on, are not in the same line as the administration. So like you're saying,
administration do better.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Thank you both.
Yeah. And make sure y'all subscribe, like to the podcast.
Do all that.
All of those things, right? Appreciate y'all.